Hello everyone and welcome to another video of Selective Malts. Today I have something different for everyone. I am not going to be reviewing any whiskies on my channel for the first time today. Instead, I have been getting a lot of questions from people asking me how is whiskey even categorized within Scotland. For example, what is a Highland whiskey? What is a Speyside whiskey? What is a Campbelltown whiskey? And the questions keep going. So today I've decided to do something completely different. I'm going to talk about the different regions of Scotland based on the whiskies and how those whiskies are different from each region. So first things first, here's a map of Scotland and here's the distribution of those regions based on the whiskies. So basically, if you can see, we've got the Highland whiskies right at the top, and if you go towards the bottom, no marks for guessing, they're called the Lowland whiskies. And then you have the whiskies that are very particular, which are the Island whiskies and the Islay whiskies. And you also have a new region called the Speyside and of course the Campbelltown whiskies. Let's talk about each region in particular. Let's start out with the most popular region, and that is, believe it or not, it is not the Islay whiskies. That's just my personal favorite. I think if there's any region that has made Scotland famous, and everyone's probably heard of a whiskey from there, and that is the Highland region. Now, what is so special about the Highlands of Scotland? Apart from the geography, and I've sent you, I'm sharing a few images here of the geography of the Scottish regions or the Highlands, but let's talk about the Highlands in particular. First things first, history lesson. The oldest distillery in the Highlands that's still operating is the Glenturret, which was founded in 1763. That's pretty old, but not the oldest distillery in Scotland, and I'll talk about that later. Some of the most famous brands that come out of the Highland regions of Scotland are, of course, the Glenmorangie, and I happen to have the Glenmorangie 19. We'll definitely be reviewing this. And of course the Glendronach, which is not that popular, but that's an unopened bottle, so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you. So what's special about Highland whiskies is, while you can get a full range of flavors in the Highland whiskies, what they're particularly well known are for their fruity, floral and spicy flavors, especially when it comes to the Glenmorangie range that seems to be experimenting with a lot of different things. The same goes for the Glendronach, which is characteristically fruity in its flavors. So that's about the Highland whiskies. Which is the most popular Highland whiskey that you probably have heard of? It's definitely the Glenmorangie over here. Let's go to the next section, or the next region of Scotland that I want to talk about. Now let's talk about the Speyside whiskies. And one thing that is very interesting to note is the oldest distillery that is still running or from that region is Strath Islay. It's spelled like this, but it's pronounced Strath Islay. It was founded in 1786. So what's special about the Speyside whiskies? That's a great question. If you haven't guessed it, it boasts of having one of the most popular brands in the world. It's not even the Glenmorangie. I'd say it would be the Glenfiddich brand, and that is the Glenfiddich 18 right there. Another popular whiskey that comes from the Speyside region is the Macallan. In fact, the Macallan 25 is one of the most iconic, sought after whiskies in the world. If you're a whiskey enthusiast, you probably have a goal of either owning a bottle or at least gulping down a couple of drams of the Macallan 25. As you might have guessed, this is also a distinct flavor profile region. What is so special about the flavors from this region? So one of the most common themes from this region is that they use sherry casks for maturing most of their whiskies, which basically means their whiskies are sweet, they're spicy, and they're extremely floral and fruity in their undertones. In fact, almost all the Speyside whiskies I've had an opportunity to taste do proudly mention about their sweet, spicy, aromatic and fruity tones. So that is what is so special about Speyside whiskies, and these two whiskies we will definitely be reviewing in the course of our channel. Let's go on to the next region, which is by far my favorite, which is the Isle of Islay. The oldest distillery in the Isle of Islay is Bowmore, founded in 1779. What is so special about this region is that this is Islay region. It is an island, and it has a characteristically spicy, peaty undertone to almost all the whiskies that are produced there. There might be non-peaty whiskies that are produced from Islay. I've not looked into that. But if you're talking about an Islay whiskey, there is a very high probability you're talking about a peaty whiskey. What are some of the common or the most popular brands that have come out from the Isle of Islay? I don't need to go for it, but I don't need to tell you, but let's do it anyway. We've got Bowmore, we've got Lagavulin, we have Ardbeg, and of course Laphroaig. Now let me go a couple of those bottles for you real quick. Right, this is me again, and if you haven't guessed it, I've got almost everything that I just mentioned to you on those whiskies. So I have the Bowmore 18, the Aston Martin edition, looking forward to reviewing that. I've heard great things. I have the Lagavulin Distillers Edition, yes. I have the Ardbeg Corryvreckan, and I have the Lagavulin 16, which is a staple for all Islay whiskey lovers. I also have, which I forgot to mention, the Laphroaig over here. So that's a great selection of Islay whiskies, and if you're into peaty whiskies, don't go any further. Nothing can compete with Islay whiskey when it comes to peaty, smoky flavors in their range. Now let's talk about the Lowlands. Now the whiskies from the Lowlands are not particularly famous, and in fact not many people would know some of the brands I'm going to mention today in the Lowlands. The oldest distillery in the Lowlands is Auchentoshan. Now I apologize if I didn't get the Scottish pronunciation right, but yes, it is the Auchentoshan, founded in 1823. There's a couple of other brands. Unfortunately, I don't have an Auchentoshan, and I don't have any of those brands from the Lowlands. That should give you an idea of how rich a heritage the Lowland whiskies have, at least in terms of their popularity. So, in terms of what the tasting notes are of the Lowland whiskies, I have not personally tasted any of these Lowland whiskies, but I'm told these whiskies are characteristically light in flavor, and they have a grassy, creamy flavor. So these are your smooth, gentle, more like a dessert or, you know, an aperitif kind of whiskies that there. It's on the list to get a bottle of Auchentoshan because I heard that it is probably the most popular brand that has come out of that region. I have nothing else. Let's go on to the next region. The other region that I want to talk about is the Campbelltown region. Unfortunately, no whiskies from the Campbelltown region either. Now, the Campbelltown whiskies are characteristically smoky in flavor and are known to compete, some as to say, with the Islay whiskies. Of course, their heritage is not as strong or well established as some of the Islay whiskies. And if you've been paying attention, you probably notice the bottles are getting lower from the back because I'm making sure that I take away the bottles that I've talked about already and putting them to the side so you can see how much of my whiskey collection is from the popular regions of the Scottish Highlands, or rather the Scottish country. Now let's talk about the final region that I want to talk about, and that's going to be very interesting for everyone to know, and that region is basically the islands. Now there's the Isle of Islay, but there are other islands around Scotland that have distilleries on them, and the island regions is basically a group of islands that are characteristically clumped together for purposes of being called a particular region. Important to note that the Isle of Islay has its own distinct culture, as I mentioned, and its own distinct identity, and then there's the other islands. What is special about this region is that there are a couple of whiskies that you've definitely heard of that come from the island regions. And what are those whiskies? The two most popular whiskies that you probably heard of from the island region are Talisker, which is from the most picturesque and beautiful place you will ever visit, or I hope you get a chance to visit, which is the Isle of Skye. Beautiful island and an equally good whiskey. And the other whiskey that is also smoky and peaty in nature is the Jura. So both these whiskies are probably a good representation of the island whiskies of the Scotland region. Let's talk about the tasting of these whiskies. Both these whiskies are a little smoky, they've got a strong character, but they're not as peaty or smoky as some of the Islay whiskies. So characteristically, Talisker has its own fan following, and I don't want to set off a fight here, but some people might say that the Talisker actually is as good as some of the other peaty whiskies. Jura, on the other hand, is a relatively new brand, but yeah, it's a good drinking choice if you are into it as well. I would appreciate a like, and above all, I appreciate any feedback that you have for me. I'm trying to improve this channel. I'm looking for sponsors, and I'm looking for people who would give me an opportunity to work with them. So hit me up. and all of you have a great day.